Welcome to another edition of Papa Bojo's Kitchen. Today we're making Italian ciabatta bread. Now there are a couple different ways you can make this. The original way, you make a sponge, an overnight sponge, and that imparts a little more of the yeasty flavor and gives you a little bigger bubbles inside the bread. But this quicker method, where you don't use the overnight sponge, gives you a great result and a great ciabatta bread as well. Here are your ingredients. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to proof our yeast mixture. For that, we're going to take a half a teaspoon of sugar, and we're going to take a quarter cup of water that needs to be between 105 and 110 degrees. This is exactly 110 degrees. And so I'm going to pour the water in, and then I'm going to take my yeast. I'm going to pour this in, and I'm going to stir the yeast around, make sure the sugar is all melted in it. And now I'm going to let this set until it becomes real foamy. Usually it's about 3 to 5 minutes. While the yeast is proofing, we're going to sift our flour into another bigger bowl. And one thing I want to mention about the flour, when you measure out your flour, don't dig your scooper into the flour and pack it down. Okay, use a smaller scoop, and if you're using a 1 cup measurement for the 4 cups, use like a half a cup measurement, scoop it out and pour it in, and pour it in until it's a mountainous top, and just give it a little shake and then flatten it off. Don't compact it. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to take this flour, I'm going to stick it all in this sifter, the screen. And the reason why we're doing this is we're aerating all of the flour so there's no clumps. If you have any little pieces behind, you don't want any clumps, but that extra air inside there allows the water to take and absorb it a lot quicker. To prepare the flour for the water and for the yeast mixture, make a little well in the center like this. Now you can see how foamy this yeast has become. That means it's really good yeast. We're going to pour this all right into the middle of our flour. And then we're going to take lukewarm water. This is 2 cups. And this is about 100 degrees. It can be 80 to 100. And what I like to do is I like to rinse out the yeast, make sure I get all of the yeast mixture with that sugar, and mix all this in. And then we're going to start stirring. Now this is going to be a really wet dough. Okay? Don't get all worried if you see it all super wet and sticky. That's really what you want. So we're going to stir this around, and we're going to continue stirring. You notice we don't need a hand mixer, or we don't need a mixer in any way, shape, or form. And when you see it come together like this, when it starts getting shaggy, add in half your salt and stir. Scrape around the sides. Add in the rest of your salt. And stir. Once the dough looks like this, again, it's wet and shaggy, you're going to take and you're going to sprinkle the top of it with some flour. Sprinkle it from up above so you get a good amount of distribution of flour over the top of it. And then we're going to take some plastic wrap. Oops. And we're going to cover this and seal it with plastic wrap. And we're going to stick it somewhere draft-free that isn't like warm or hot, but it's not cool. So now, as I mentioned, I'm going to put this in my oven. I'm going to set my timer, and I'm going to let it rise for 2 hours. It should nearly triple in size, and if it does that, you got a great dough, and we'll move to the next step. So it's been 2 hours, and the dough has, in fact, tripled in size. And you can see how jiggly it is. And that's just the way it's supposed to be, like this. So now I wear plastic gloves only because I found that it makes it easier. The dough doesn't stick to it as well. So I'm going to take some water and I'm going to put it on a clean surface here because we're going to put our dough and wet your hands and then take your dough and pour it right out on this wet surface. Try to do it so you can see it. And there it goes on the wet surface. So now I'm going to take my table scraper and I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it over once. I'm going to fold it over twice. I'm just folding it and I'm just sort of making like a round little loaf. Now I've got my oven warming up to 425 and I've got a tray here, the one I had my water in. Doesn't matter if there's a little water, and I'm going to stick it in there too on the very bottom because I've got some water boiling on my oven and I'm going to pour some water and carefully pour it in just before I put this dough into the oven. So now I've got some flour and I'm going to fairly liberally spread this flour all over parchment paper lined cookie sheet. Then I'm going to take my loaf that I have and I'm going to carefully bring it to the parchment paper and I'm going to form it to the shape that I want it. I'm going to make myself a nice wide loaf of ciabatta. And you can see this is very wet and it's free form. And then I'm going to take a little more flour. I'm going to sprinkle it up on top. So my oven's up to temperature. So I'm going to take my boiling water that I have here and I'm going to pour that into the pot. You can hear it sizzle. You have to be real careful when you do that. And then you take and you put your ciabatta bread in here in the oven and we're going to cook it for 20 minutes. And by then we'll take a look at it. If it's golden brown and you knock on it and it's hollow, it's all done. So it's actually been about 35 minutes. This loaf that I made is a little bigger than normal. And usually I cut it into 2 loaves and it takes about 20 minutes for a smaller loaf. But it's done now. I had to actually wait until the internal temperature was 190 or higher, which it is, to make sure it's fully cooked. And I'm going to bring it and I'm going to show it to you right now. That's this nice ciabatta bread. We'll put it on a cooling rack, let it cool for a few minutes, and then we'll slice it open and take a look at it. So I've got a nice serrated bread knife. Take the bread. I'm going to cut a piece. I like the heel. And look at this ciabatta. See how nice and steamy it is? See the holes? See the texture of it? That's what you want in the ciabatta. Again, if you use an overnight sponge, these holes will even be bigger. But let me tell you something. This bread is incredible. So I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Papa Bojo's Kitchen. I hope you'll give this ciabatta bread recipe a chance. It's really fantastic. And thank you once again for coming and see me. Buon appetito, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.